New students under my tutelage in the field of intelligence operations often ask me for examples in terms of how covert activities are conducted. Also, a lot of these new students are in the field of intelligence operations on a conditional basis, in that they still have yet to acquire certain levels of clearance. So what I usually do is I provide some anecdotes, some examples from the private sector. I use real-world examples of past intelligence activities in the private business corporate sectors. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, what do you mean? Those aren't covert activities. Those aren't covert operations. You're talking about the private sector. In fact, they are covert activities. What a lot of Americans don't know, people outside the field of intelligence operations, people who are non-professionals in this field of counterintelligence, this field of counterterrorism, this field of intelligence operations, don't know is that governments around the world, not just the U.S. government, the U.S. government uses businesses as operational cover for clandestine covert activities, counterintelligence activities. Private sector businesses, corporations, are utilized in such a way that those businesses, those companies, those entities provide certain cover for various covert activities. That's the very nature of the intelligence profession. So, believe it or not, businesses in the United States of America that you see often, sometimes, in certain instances, in various instances, actually serve as front companies for intelligence activities. The people who are at the top of the corporations, the top of the business, the top of the company, they don't know. They don't know what's going on. However, people are inserted from certain intelligence networks into those entities, those corporations, companies, businesses, and there is counterintelligence work that is carried out, conducted, that is done in that U.S. business sector. So, going back to what I was originally beginning to say, with respect to my indoctrination into the intelligence community, it was after the first, I'd say, 3 years of college, I was introduced to a woman in Bellevue, Washington. I won't say who it was or how this took place, but I was introduced to this woman who is a professional in the field of government contracts, defense, military, intelligence contracts, defense, security, intelligence contracts. I was introduced to her. As indicated, she was, and I would imagine is still, a professional in her field. Shortly thereafter, I had to begin plying the craft of intelligence, covert operations. I had to make my way into the field as a professional. I had to prove myself, and I had to demonstrate that I was capable of carrying out covert operations. If you are new to the field of intelligence activities, counterintelligence, intelligence operations, and you plan to work overseas in foreign countries outside the United States of America and conduct espionage targeting foreign companies, corporations, foreign governments, foreign entities, as those same entities conduct information campaigns against the United States of America, intelligence campaigns, intelligence operations, believe you me, you ought to know how it works on some level already. Foreign governments, even allies of the United States of America, gather intelligence on U.S. soil. The British, for example, are strong allies of the United States. They, nonetheless, gather intelligence information from the United States of America on U.S. soil. Even though there's an agreement that we don't do that called Yakuza, UK-USA, it's still done. The United States still spies against Great Britain. Everybody in the intelligence community who is anybody knows that that's just how it works. Canada spies on the United States. Believe it or not, regardless of what you hear, Canada conducts intelligence operations targeting the United States. The Canadians spy on the United States of America. It's still, yes, North America, but they spy on the United States. The United States spies on Canada. Regardless of what you think, what you've heard, if you don't know this, that's just the very nature of spying. Every country spies against every other country. Sure, we're allies, but that's how it's carried out. That's how it's conducted. That's how it's all done. So what I did to begin with was I selected a target in the U.S. private sector. I chose a good cause. I picked a wayward, untoward company in my view. I thought to myself, this company has to pay for its evils, for its immoral activities, for the things that it's done. It has to pay. There have to be repercussions. I see no one doing anything to pay back this particular company, corporation, for the evils that it's spun, for the evil that it's done. So I selected the target, chose my target, and I made some telephone calls. I worked behind a proxy server that was anonymous. So in other words, I was behind an anonymous triple layer, we'll say, firewall system, concentric rings of defense, untraceable, unknown. I won't mention any dates, any times, any persons. It'll just all be generalized information and somewhat vague. So at any rate, this particular company was in the business of putting on public performances, very large concerts, we'll say, outdoor concerts. And again, I haven't mentioned any particular region in the United States of America, as I've worked throughout the United States of America and overseas. So I haven't mentioned any particular regions, any particular state. I haven't mentioned any specifics. I haven't been particular at all in this information that I'm conveying to you. So this particular business, could be any corporation, was in the business in the past, and you don't know when this took place. This could have been 20 years ago. You don't know, because I've been a student of intelligence before I was actually a professional in the field for many decades. I started off young. My mother, she worked overseas out of embassies on behalf of the United States government. She was stationed in Mogadishu, Somalia. She was in Kenya. She was in Calcutta, India. She was many different places in the world, as was my father. He was stationed in Korea for 3 years. He was in Panama for numerous years. My family has traveled the world, so I started out young in the discipline of intelligence. My mother had a top secret security clearance. I used to read her military doctrine. I used to read her entire vast library of military sciences and what have you. And I was in the high IQ program at the University of Washington at age 4. So I selected my target. I placed some telephone calls. I called local law enforcement anonymously. I convened a forum, and I called together community leaders. And I said, look, basically this company wants to put on an outdoor concert, we'll say, in your particular community. And I have noticed, as have others, that every year there have been so many numbers of rapes. Every year, women, young women, we'll say between the ages of 14 on up to early 20s, 25, between the ages of 14 and 25, are raped every year. It's insane. You know, there are these young women who come to this event and they get raped every year, and no one does anything about it. Sure, law enforcement is contacted and there are reports that are filed, but the concert goes on annually, and look, girls are going to get raped this year. So why let this thing happen in your community if the company that puts this thing on is not providing adequate security services? They're simply raping the youth and making a buck. That's what they're doing. So now, the way you may look at this is, I was a lobbyist. Sure, so be it. Nonetheless, I conducted corporate intelligence. I conducted corporate counterintelligence. I conducted sabotage against this U.S. company, this U.S. corporation, against this major business enterprise, this major business entity. And again, it was untraceable. So I did this, I carried it out, and as a result, that entity lost $1 million, at least $1 million that year. That community was fed up with this enterprise coming into its neck of the woods, into its neighborhood, littering because of all the numbers of people, untold numbers of people that would attend this thing annually. And they were thinking that they would let this entity come in and have this annual event. I stopped it. I single-handedly put a stop to it, covertly, clandestinely, because they didn't know who I was. And again, I was behind proxy server that was anonymous, an anonymous computer system. There was no trace of telephone records because I was already working as a U.S. government contractor. So I had access to certain technology, and I was using fake names and aliases and different identities and multiple identities and so on and so forth. So I made sure that this thing did not happen, and the enterprise, the evil empire behind it, was not pleased. They lost over $1 million that year, and they don't really, even to this day, understand what happened. I was the person behind that. I was responsible for that. So if you want to go overseas and do the same kind of work, you need to prove that you're capable of doing this kind of thing. I didn't go into exact details, and I didn't tell you the entire story. I told you a fraction of the story, and I've done other things. If you want to work overseas, you might have to stop a certain leader from getting elected. These are the types of things that we do in the field of intelligence.